I want to invite you and give you permission to be present right now. We all probably scrambled here from, a frenetic, fast-paced day, and I firmly believe that we don't do a mindful enough job of allowing ourselves to slow down, be where we are, where our feet are, where our bodies are, and really give ourselves permission to allow our mind and our body to be in the same place. So that's the invitation. Um, and with that, I'd like to start off with a few shout outs. And I just picked three, and I kind of went from the gut. The first one is from Mary Hannah, who said on the Wall of Winds, "In today's gateways to flow, I was inspired by the reality we all share of freedom of choice, especially the fact that in any given moment, it is freeing to know that I can choose my attitude. The key, though, is to remain present and actually exercise that choice." So I found that to be really impactful and really resonated with me. The second one was from Sarah, who's on this tonight, sharing what presence means with my 7-year-old, who saw my presence sticky note and asked me about it. She's going to hold me accountable. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. And the last one was from, let's see, what I got here. Madeline is the last one that I pulled out. "I didn't let myself get dragged into another colleague's negativity. I just stepped back and gave them space to vent." So to me, those were really, they really resonated with me. Of course, so many of them did. Hopefully you all are scrolling through this wall and learning from one another and sharing with one another. And hopefully that feels comfortable and maybe slightly uncomfortable, where we're starting to explore and express these smaller moments in our lives, which comes from being a bit more present. And in the video that I had sent this morning around, not so much about judging, shifting, changing, but more of witnessing and noticing. And from that place, we can kind of allow ourselves to keep calm and stay clear and have a better chance of giving space if that's what we need. Not getting defensive if we're being held accountable, if that's what we need. And starting to understand ourselves on these kind of micro levels, where we can, instead of going into big dips and big rises, we can start to kind of understand and ready and steady ourselves a little bit more in moment to moment living, which is precisely what presence is. I have the pleasure of having my good buddy on this call at this first intermission, who is a friend of mine who we met several years ago in Costa Rica on a beach. Our kids were going to the same day camp. I happened to be the cool dad that rented a golf cart, and we were taking our kids to the day camp in this golf cart. And Jeremy happened to be the dad that said, "Hey, can I jump in the golf cart on the way home?" So we were practicing a lot of 70s parenting, letting our kids drive the golf cart down the road. But I wrote him the other day and said, who would have known we would have come to be where we are today? Jeremy and I, we are co-hosts of a podcast called Stimulus and Response. I'll put that in the link a little bit later. But more specifically for Jeremy, he is an author and a journalist who's written some amazing books, and also we'll link those as well. And the reason why I wanted Jeremy to come on today, number one, we have such great, robust conversations when we talk, but I find Jeremy's ability to articulate this concept of presence to be really entertaining and also really grounding. Um, so, Jeremy and Smith, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself. And I'd like to just maybe start with just your thoughts right now in the present moment. How are you doing?
I am newly present in some ways to myself because I unhid my self view. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a phrase I would have said 6 months ago, but I think we all maybe know what I mean. I find that I'm usually, so I could unmute, but I do find I'm more present when I hide my self view. So I'm going to hide my self view again. So I'm not fleetingly looking at myself every once in a while. That also means if I disappear, if something happens, I rely on Nicole, Andrea, Arjun, Rhodey, Rachel, Bethany, all of you, Annette. Yeah, let me know. Holler, whatever. Come through the screen, grab my toes, bring me back. Hopefully, I won't have been raptured or something, or hopefully, I will have been raptured. So I'm in a better place if you can't find me, and happy to be here. I'm honored, and it's fun to see you all and connect. So those are my early thoughts on presence.
Well, thanks for being here, Jeremy. To give you a little context for the week, as I just said in the beginning here, really about noticing what's happening right now. Painfully simple as a concept, but really, really, can be excruciating to practice. Um, you have some pretty cool and entertaining stories around exploring presence and how you've embraced, putting this into a little bit more into the front and center of your day-to-day life. Anything specific come to mind for you in terms of some of your tales that you would like to share with us?
Sure. I'll say just briefly that for me, a lot of these explorations began at a silent meditation retreat that I went to uh, a year and a half ago. And I went as a journalist in part, and I guess more generally as an explorer. I didn't have a specific goal from the experience, and I had almost no grounding, no background. I had very little idea, even things like how to sit, how it worked. And to the point where I hadn't thought about it, that at a silent meditation retreat, how do you learn? Right? Because people aren't telling you stuff, or at least at this particular retreat, even the one designated leader had very few words to say. And he was meditating with us, Tibetan monk. He wasn't kind of coming in and out in a normal teacher way. He was sort of modeling by walking the walk. And so I had to figure all that out myself, which was experiential learning, which is ideal if you can. It's like being thrown into a pool that you can't drown in because it's not water, but it is the pool of yourself. And ultimately, it's the pool of presence. And so for me, it was an extraordinary experience. And I guess I'll just share as an opener 3 really quick takeaways. So one was my first entry into presence was extreme discomfort. And I think that's common for all of us. You can be biking while sipping a mochaccino while checking your phone. And when you're not present, when you crash and you're in horrible pain, all of a sudden the presence is very real. And as I was learning just how to sit for 20 minutes in a row, 30 minutes in a row, 45 minutes in a row, even just physically, just how to sit upright without squirming too much, falling on the ground, getting up and taking a walk, just things like my ankles were burning and my back was aching. And that really brought me into the moment in part. and it was a tremendous amount of pain. But then as soon as the bell rang, I noticed it all disappeared. And it wasn't that I had moved, it just gave me that sense of how much is modulated in my own head. So I'll put that out there for those of you, and you can think about whether you've had similar experiences or not. But when you kind of break through the pain and get to another side, it's often transcendent. Not that I'm recommending pain, but for me, that was my actual experience. Then, as I got more physically adept and more comfortable, I noticed presence not in the negative sense of what was afflicting me, but in physical awareness. And I was able to hear sounds and feel the temperature in the air and have the smell. It was the meditation hall was in the same building, although quite far apart from the kitchen. So you could hear the meals being made, the sort of events of the day outside of your own head, and gradually sort of sunk into where I was rather than where I didn't want to be or how I didn't want to feel. And the third thing was a presence in time. And the best analogy I can give is kind of like the old thing of like a hobo or whatever trying to catch a train, and you're kind of running alongside the train and you're trying to hop on the train. And this was trying to catch the present moment. And the trick was it was by going slower and slower until the moment caught me. And that was revelatory to me that you don't race to get to the present moment. It's a matter of just slowing down and slowing down and slowing down and slowing down, whether that's first breathing and then heartbeat and then thoughts and then physical awareness. And then there's just sort of an openness that to me was a dissolving almost of the self, and was able to just watch a leaf flutter, an ant cross a square of a sidewalk, all the sort of marveling that you do stereotypically in film, and not only in film when you take a certain substance, but the substance was presence. And that was it. So I guess those were a few pathways to me. One, pain. Two, taking in the senses as they were. And then three, slowing down until the train of the present moment had caught me.
Thanks for sharing. Excuse me. Thanks for sharing that, Jeremy. I've always been struck by that, and it really resonates with me. Where then I typically want to go, and I'm sure many of us also feel this way, is when you left the euphoria of, you know, Tibetan monk and being able to go through these stages, and you came home to normal life where, you know, who's got time to see the leaf or the ant, especially when my kids got to get to school and I'm busy and I got to get to work. How can you square those realizations and discoveries with coming back in and being a real person in the real world? um, because that's really hard. and and I'm sure you have some ideas around what that looked like when you had the rude awakening of, you know, scrambling my kid to school and etc.
Right. Enlightenment is wasted on monks, right? They're just alone. It's like if a tree is happy in a forest, what does it do for me? So I guess I'll go just through those three backwards, and I'll just add a few practices that relate to me from them. So one, the slowness. So for me, something I've added to my daily practice is getting up a little earlier than I used to and going outside and looking around and just being with things as they are in a way I don't have to fit out. There's not a problem to solve. I don't have to interact with somebody. I'm not trying to get anything out of it. I'm just trying to be with things as they are in that first moment of the day. And it creates a little bit of a story. And by that, I mean, oh, there's a full moon. A couple days later, oh, there's a new moon. Oh, there's a moon that's red. That's not the moon, that's Mars. Or the wind is blowing, it's moving these trees. Look at them flower. Look at them shed, wherever it is over the course of this year. Trees have this amazing presence. They're giant, they're alive, they're adaptable. They take all this snow in. Or I hear a dog bark, or I hear a baby cry, or I hear a train go by. It's really, I just try to be there for one thing that I'm registered and able just to take in without wrestling with it, without having to interact with it. And I just think having that space at any moment in your day, but if it can be a first moment, it's quite a luxury. And I don't think it has to mean getting up earlier. It could just mean on the way to the car, I'm going to have a moment where I just wait for the world to come to me instead of taking the world. The second thing,
I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah,
pause
please.
you right there. I can't wait to hear the other two, but just wanted to add a little science to that. What Jeremy's explaining is more of a bottom up processing. So instead of typically we're in the driver's seat, we are manipulating, managing, interacting with our environment, and we have an agenda. I need to get somewhere. I need to get something. And that is the problem solving intellectual part of our brain that is in control. But what Jeremy is doing is he's priming his brain to go from the bottom up, where he's just taking things in with his senses and not making more than that. And that is a really refreshing skill to develop. We don't have the capacity or willpower to always be in control of everything. And so this is a part of active recovery that he is inserting at the very beginning of his day. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
And I'll say, if that itself is stressful, like I often say, there's nothing more relaxing than being in someone else's backyard. Because in my own backyard, it's like, oh, what do I got to mow, or what's a mess, or whatever. If your own immediate environment is just problems, I also can sometimes just think about another place that's also existing at this moment. So that could be that beach that I was there with Damon. Or if I'm like, that beach is threatened, I can say, okay, 500 yards deeper than that, or under a rock, underwater in a lake. And it's not that I'm transporting myself there. It's just that that is something that is also happening at this moment, and it doesn't require me to wrestle with. So again, if what you can physically see isn't doing it for you, there are those alternatives. The second thing I mentioned was sensory. And, I love doing a pretty quick sensory scan where can I try to smell? Can I see what taste is on my tongue? A body scan is longer, and that's so sensory. You realize how much sensory input we have. When we say feel, it can mean so many things. If you have time for it, great. And maybe we'll have time for a meditation at the end on this topic. But for me, the most powerful is actually sound. And I just try to hear 3 distinct sounds, period, at a moment of stress or anxiety or emotion in the course of a day. Or maybe it's not even a clear moment of stress. It's just I get kind of tackled by a thought, and if I can catch it and realize I'm having a thought, it's okay to have thoughts, but they can kind of pick me up and take me away. I'm not in control of them often. And so I find just stopping and seeing if I can just stop and listen to 3 sounds from beginning to end. Again, these are outside of my control, but they will come, and they'll come pretty quickly. And all I got to do is hear it from beginning to end. So it could be a train whistle going by. It could be a car, but it's not just hearing it. Here's a car. It's also letting it go all the way to the end till that's gone. And it's not long. And I also count my own breathing in that mix. It's fine. I've got usually an easy one. And if not, I can breathe heavier. And those are really useful because they do center me again in ways that Damon, I'm sure, can explain the science. So I could talk about how much they do for me, but maybe you'd rather it'd be useful maybe if you can explain why that works so well. I just know it. I just know it came really naturally, and it does. And I guess for me, my best guess is an analog. It is like a version, literally, of like this too will pass. My thoughts are like the sounds, the activity, the moment, whatever the situation, good or bad, it's gonna come out of nothing and it's gonna go back to nothing, just like the sounds. So I can extend that philosophically, but it's much more physical. It's much more present. So maybe you can explain why, David.
Yeah, I mean, well, a couple of things to pluck out of there. One, when Jeremy mentioned the beach, that is something that we are familiar with in this program, this challenge around our happy place. And the genesis of that story is a group of psychiatrists in the US met at the beginning of COVID, and they discussed the most practical application for helping people deal with the trauma and the loss and the grief. And everyone leaned in. Here we go, this is going to be some kind of really rigorous science type of exclamation or explanation. And they said the best thing that we've seen is to help people find their happy place. And really, what happened there, what happens with Jeremy listening to sounds from beginning to end, is he's allowing himself to shift his state and really kind of, you can picture like a dog that grabs onto one of their chewies, and their jaws are just clenched on it and they just don't know how to let go of that. We live a lot of our lives that way, where it's just just as an experiment for all of you right now, I want you to just to be mindful of your jaw and notice if your jaw can release any more than you just recognize. I mean, chances are this happens to me all throughout the day, and I'll bring my attention to it and like, oh, wow, I'm clenching. I'm holding on to something. And that, in a lot of ways, is pulling me away from all the richness of the present moment. So catching on to sounds, in this case for Jeremy, I would also invite you to just sort of feel yourself in your seat right now. These small ways to just kind of come back here. Wrestling with thoughts, as you said, Jeremy. Thoughts can be wonderful, but thoughts are not also all truth. And yet we typically are fairly skeptical as people. I'll believe it when I see it. But we typically buy most of the thoughts that go on in our heads, or at least we grapple with them, or suppress them, or push them down, or follow the threads. So these practices, as small as they sound, are really wonderful ways to just kind of regain access to your nervous system and really fully embody being back in the present moment. And to me, present moment, I said it at the beginning, but when your mind and your body are both doing the same thing, is my kind of small definition around presence. I mean, how many times have you been brushing your teeth, but thinking about the project that's going to happen in 2 hours? Or you come home, you're cooking, but you're already worried about something that's going to happen later that night. We're not in the same place when that's happening. And there's this low grade level of anxiety and just not feeling the fullness and the richness of the moment. So Jeremy seeing the cycles of the moon, etc., bringing some of that awareness back in with the senses are just really powerful, simple practices to shift state and to be more present, be here now. I didn't notice a lot of judgment in what you were saying. that you were beating yourself up a lot by saying, God, where did I just go? It felt to me as if this has now become a practice for you where you simply habituate this and roll this in. And with that, I kind of want to segue to what we're going to do in small breakout rooms. So just to give you a chance to sort of speak your story a little bit, very simple prompt that, Yosef will kind of collect us in groups of 5, somewhere around there. But we want to explore a little bit, not just present moment, but where are you finding yourself more in flow? So those triggers that kind of get you really kind of feeling good, like I'm lost in the moment. I'm so connected to what I'm doing. Oh wow, half hour just went by. I didn't even realize it. Or you're just sort of kind of in the zone. You're feeling good about what you're doing. Where are you finding yourself in those spaces? If you can kind of explore a little bit around that. And then also, where are you finding, probably more importantly right now, where are we getting triggered? Where are we losing that ability to be in flow through distractions and interruptions and all the other things? So with that, we're going to spend about 10 minutes just sort of speaking and hearing one another. Of course, it's your choice if you want to just pass and think about it, but just want to invite you to kind of start to think a little bit more about where these things are cropping up for you, and maybe get a little insight from each other as you do so. So Yosef, are you prepared to put people in rooms? So we'll give you probably a 1-minute warning when. All right.
It's worth a breakout.
All right. I hear a familiar voice.
Beautiful, beautiful. That was great. Thank you to Annette, Rodi, and Arjun and my group. Hopefully you all had interesting conversations. Anybody interested in just sharing out a little bit? Let's take a minute and what grabbed you? Maybe what surprised you about something that you even said. I think that would be a helpful thing for the whole group to hear.
I don't think we broke any, Damon, in terms of what is blocking or generating flow, but we did kind of talk this from our own experiences, what's blocking from the distractions and media, social media and national media and kind of crisis fatigue that's wearing us down. And I think just that chance to, just for a few of us to talk, for a breakout of 4 people, just to kind of chat as briefly as it was worthwhile. As we're getting to know each other, we'll see each other from time to time. But so I don't think we broke. We're not going to be able to write a new chapter for you on flow blockers and flow triggers.
Our group has chapters. I don't know what you're talking about. We had self-love. We had multitasking on the positive and the negative, and we had some cool talk about speed. And I'll just say what it brought up for me, which is something I often say when I'm trying to do a book, where every day I'm trying to. It feels like I've done nothing, but if you write a page a day, that's 365 pages in a year. So I often just say to myself, the faster I go, the slower I go. The slower I go, the faster I go. And I think, one of our breakout room members talked about along the same lines, can you kind of catch up to yourself? And if you're in a hurry, it's hard to be effective, and it's certainly hard to be present. And so there is that art of slowing down, even if the goal is effectiveness and efficiency.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I think time was also something that was a theme in ours, not having enough of it. And, I think that's a real concern for most of us, of course, but that if we can kind of break that down, and one phrase that we have been saying here for several months is, when things are big, go small. And it's really daunting when we look at all the things we have to do. And then what typically happens is this cascading effect of becoming more stressed. And then whatever it is that we're doing it less well. And then we feel a little less good. And then the next thing we do, we feel just a little less of our full whole self. And this it goes on and on and on, because we have so much to do. We see the big mountain and we forget that we actually have to take a step, and not just a step, but a mindful step of really kind of being able to shrink that down. So using some of the novel things in our lives as triggers. Jeremy mentioned senses. I make mac and cheese with peas for my daughter. And I do that like a Zen master, because I have to do that, or else I start running the narrative of scrambling around, and now half the macaroni and cheese is on the ground, and I rip the bag open of peas, and they're all, now that I'm in big trouble, because I'm just kind of moving farther and farther away from the present moment. So finding these little things
Unless you have a dog. If you have a dog in the
right. Yeah. No, nobody is more present than a canine. That's for sure. But I wanted to shift over briefly and let Scott have a few minutes here to share a little bit about flow. And Scott, why this state of flow can be such a powerful antidote to some of this scattershot living that most of us spend a lot of our time in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still reflecting on our previous conversation with Jeremy, and I hope he shares the second arrow principle. But I think a big part of, what we're talking about flow is really about that state management. And, even in our last conversation, we talked a little bit about, instead of being so concerned about having the to-do list, like, what is my to-be list? Like, what am I going to be? I know I got a ton of things I have to do, but what do I want to be as I'm navigating through my day in my role as a parent, especially as some of us are working from home or having to work while at home, and be a teacher while at home, and be a spouse or a partner at home. We have all these roles that we're trying to be. And so part of the conversation is, what is that state that I want to be in while I'm doing it? And so for me, it's just to maintain a sense of calm. And so things that I can do, and if I notice that I'm doing things that take me out of being calm, finding these little practices of like breath or going to my happy place is the pivot for me. And I think there's a body of science that really kind of suggests that if you know what your blockers are, we start to consider what can you do instead that would get you, into that flow state or into that sense of being. And I think a lot of times, there's a great book called Rethinking Positive Thinking, where the woman, she's got an acronym called WHOOP. And she describes this idea of, like, we all have these wishes to be a certain way. We have a goal or an objective. But let's say, for example, I want to get in better shape. I want to lose some weight. But every time I come home, I'm too tired, and so I just watch TV. So we have these rules, and I think someone in our group talked about habits, and changing habits are really difficult. Or breaking habits are really difficult. It's about creating these new habits, these new practices, if you will, which what we've been talking about within the Flow Challenge is, like, what are the practices of maintaining a state that is helping you feel your best and perform at your best. And so by giving you these alternatives, and I think, Jeremy, you've given some really good ideas around just listen to a sound from start to finish. What a great pattern interrupt to bring you to a sense of in the here and the now, in the moment. And then not judge it. I think there's the other thing too, is, I always hear people who try to do those meditations and they beat themselves up because meditating is like trying to train a puppy, and you get it to sit for half a second and then you're, and you get agitated, and that's okay too, because at least you're noticing. And I think you mentioned today, Damon, around the observing mind and the thinking mind. And I think, to me, the ideal, am I being what I said I wanted to be? And am I intentional with that? So, again, flow state is all about state management, and it makes a difference. So, but I would love for Jeremy, if you could share a little bit about that second arrow principle, because I think a lot of times when we're not in the state that we want to be in, we judge ourselves. Right. And I don't think and maybe that was where you were going with this, the going backwards up the thing when you talk about presence hurts. I don't know if that's where the second arrow was coming from on that one.
So second arrow is the Buddhist concept. The idea being you are in situations where you get hurt. You have some level of pain and they're hard. And that's not in your control. And that's the first arrow. And the second arrow is when you judge yourself for being in that situation. And you're really upset that you're in that situation and that you're feeling like it's inevitable and interminable and all the other sort of judgments and flows, you're not doing it right. And that's self-inflicted. And that distinction is often said like pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And to the degree that's true, I think of it in those terms. Can we manage that second arrow? Pain is inevitable. I think so much of our suffering is from our judgment over our own pain points, being in pain. And the other teaching, of course, is the second arrow hurts like 10 times as much as the first arrow. So I guess just to spin it in a positive direction, I wanted to just say, I've just been moved just looking at your faces or your names. You are here. You are making this effort. You want to find peace and presence and connection and serve yourself and just live in a way that serves you, and that radiates out. And just, I know you're going to hop off this and go to this, that, and the other, or you're going to meditate and get distracted, or, so will I. And we don't need to say like, I just did it for 10 minutes or I did that, but we can also just have a beat, but at least before the but. Between this, we can make a little space before we put in the second arrow where we're just like, I did that. I took care of myself. I just tried to do something. I'm doing my best. Like I am trying to do things. That's pretty cool. Not everyone's trying that. And maybe I can spread some of that. So, and just be on that for a minute without having to judge it or add to it. So maybe that's the antidote to the second arrow, just having a little bit self-appreciation moments too.
Yeah. And Jeremy, I think that's important because Damon, you talk a lot about that N equals 1. Like this is the experiment of you being you. And in the positive psychology realm, one of the things they discover is like the number one cause of unhappiness is comparing yourself to others. And you inevitably, when you start saying, I'm not being a good parent, there's some sort of thing that you're trying to be like something else or someone else. And it's not possible in that moment. And so I think to your point, giving yourself a break and giving yourself some grace is it's a gift, I think, in terms of pivoting out of that state of perfection.
Yes. I have a friend who calls it the this can't be happening paradox. Every time you say this can't be happening, well, guess what? Whatever it is, it's happening. So, this is whatever it is. Maybe it's pain or not. This can't be happening is the suffering. So, but this
Jeremy,
is happening too. Sweet.
You also have, as a writer, and I think you marry your ability to practice this presence and the other disciplines that you practice, and you're also a writer, and that your ability to grab and use language has always felt spacious to me. Even you and I just recorded a podcast a couple hours ago, and I was mentioning about things that were happening to me. I had this event happen. I started to explore, expose myself to things that were uncomfortable. Could you just run through how you segued off of the self-talk, being kind of first person, to create some space in that moment. It felt really luxurious when you did it for me.
Yeah, and this relates to Scott's question about that first practice about being in pain, because that's, I think, where I really developed it, at that crux. And I think we never want to be in pain, but if we can be in it and stay in it and get through it, and that's often emotional, it's not always physical, then there are some pretty big rewards on the other side. And will often be more painful to keep pushing it off and having to return to it over and over. But to your question, and I think it is rooted in that meditation pain experience, is I went to the third person. And instead of saying, me, this is happening to I, how am I going to get through this? I started narrating it and saying, a person's ankles really hurt right now. A person is wondering when this is going to be over. A person is sweating from his ears. A person is wondering if we're going to have lunch soon. A person is looking at the person in front of him. A person is calming down a little. A person is feeling amazing all of a sudden. A person got ahead of himself. A person's ankles are really feeling like alive with snakes. And, you know, when you were having that experience yourself, I just narrated from that same perspective. And I just said, a person got feedback from one of these diagnostic assessments that was different from his self view. And a person is wondering, does he know himself at all? And a person is wondering if he's been deluded and he's a jerk, or he needs to figure a whole bunch of things out. And a person is scrambling to rework his own story. And a person's asking another person if that's true for them, if they've had that experience. And the other person is telling that person that, yeah, they've had that, but it sounds like you're doing your best and it's going to be okay. And a person is feeling relieved. And a person is glad he asked. And the other person is glad he asked too. And there's just a nice little space and distance, at least that I've found in both those fraught physical moments and in those emotional moments, and just saying, you know, a person is having this experience, and I'm able to often have more sympathy, and it's just less like I'm failing, because it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I was telling Damon, you know, the funny thing, my sister has a funny practice where she takes like celebrity headlines and she replaces the celebrity names with a person. So it's just like, a person is engaged. A person is thinking about buying a new home. A person, you know, is buying seen buying Cheetos in a New York City airport. A person getting back on this person is getting back on the dating scene. And, you know, we can do that for ourselves, and we can also do that for others, and we can sort of mediate everything through that. And to me, it's a nice unifying and distancing thing that makes it safer.
Well, it works really well because you are creating space between the stimulus and the response, which is huge. And I used to do a lot of, family systems and family dynamic stuff. We do role plays, and we used to like be in costume and try to debrief it, but we're still pissed at each other. And then we finally said, we took off our costumes and put them over on a set of chairs. And so we started talking about those roles in a very different way. And so we were able to calm ourselves. And so I think there is a lot of science that suggests that if you can actually put distance between, you know, yourself and whatever you're experiencing, has some profound impacts on your nervous system. So it's, you know, you're kind of speaking to that space, Jeremy.
Credit to Game of Thrones, because I remember the character Arya was training, and when she wasn't trained to be a warrior, she dropped her name and she was like, this one, or a girl is doing this, or a girl, you know, I started probably saying a girl is ankles hurt, and then I started feeling funny, even though it was all in my own head. So I had to change to a person. But
a person is mindful of time and is wondering if a person would take us out with a small meditation. Would a person be willing to do that?
Are you talking to me?
Oh yeah, you're the person. Yeah.
What is our timing? Do you want it to be a minute? Do you want it to be 5 minutes? What do you guys got?
I think we should probably do a 1 minute.
Sure.
Yeah.
So here's a really quick one. Sometimes I call it toe, hip, elbow, chin. And just in the moment you're in, whatever state you're in, whatever situation you're entering, what is your toes experience of this moment? How is it experienced? Is it agitated? Is it calm? Is it warm? Is it cold? How about your hip? Is your hip, how's it experiencing thing? Wherever you're going next, is your hip thinking about it, or is it kind of here? Does it feel your pants or anything else around it? What's your hips experience at this moment? How about your elbow? Is there some heat there? Is it pretty neutral? Can you kind of access the energy or sensation that your elbow is experiencing, whether it's a sweatshirt or air conditioning or tendonitis, whatever it is, it is. And then your chin. Is there a breeze your chin's picking up? Is it close enough to your tongue to taste? Does it have any thoughts, or is it pretty zen? Is it pretty okay in this moment? And just let's remember all those other pieces and parts, whether they're the vertebrae of our back or the sides of our knees or the hairs on our head. They're all with us, and they all are sensate too. They can feel. So let's be able to access what they're feeling too and borrow from their presence as we go forward.
Jeremy, thank you so much. It was wonderful to be in the presence with all of you. Thank you all for making the time to spend this hour together with all of us. And we will record this. And if you want to circle back and check it out, please do. But try to take something from what Jeremy was saying and see if you can insert it, apply it, contemplate it, but do so as presently as possible. So with that, thank you all so much for coming to our first intermission. Scott, any parting words?
No, I'm whole. I'm good. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to share, but it's the difference between interesting and useful at this point. I think I'm in a good spot. So,
all right. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you,
everybody.
Jeremy. Appreciate it.
Hey, and Damon, you're going to post some stuff, right? You're going to post some stuff for Jeremy's contacts, and did you get all those links in there?
I'll post some stuff for Jeremy's contacts, and I'll post his books that are available.
And your podcast.
And our podcast as well. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.